You're listening to Tarazi Tuesdays with the Bible as Literature.
Hi, this is Father Mark Boulos, and you are listening to Tarazi Tuesdays with the Bible as Literature podcast. This week, Father Paul stresses that in Hebrew and Greek, the word house reflects the meaning of both house and household. I am delighted to introduce Father Paul on the Bible as Literature podcast, Tarazi Tuesdays.
Going back to Exodus, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them upon the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live. That's the Pharaoh telling his servants. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. And that is already preparing the hearer to realize that in the so-called Exodus a little bit later, it is the will of God that will prevail and not the will of Pharaoh. Okay? You just hear the story as it is, and you don't paint an icon of Saint Shifra and Saint Pua as the Orthodox do. Oh, great women, saintly women, and then you decide which one of the two will become the protectress of the midwives and the patroness of the midwives. I mean, come on now! So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this? And let the male children live." Okay? Now, if you decide in Minnesota that these two women saints would become the protectresses of the midwives, no one will stop you. The governor of Minnesota will not say anything. Which means you are not rendering the scriptural story. And listen to their answer, very interesting, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous. The Hebrew is interesting because it's the feminine participle plural of the verb haya, to live. Remember, there are two verbs. Haya means he was, and haya means he lived. Hayim, life. They are full of life. That is how the original sounds. And thus, one step further, they give life. And are delivered, they give birth before the midwife comes to them. Very interesting answer. That is really a joke against the Pharaoh. What can we do? It's already all done. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. Okay? Here suddenly the English has people. Technically you can take it plural or singular, but it can work both ways. But again, the Hebrew has the singular with the first verb, وَيِّرِبْ ha'am, the people singular multiplied, but then you use following that the plural, which is common in Hebrew, in the Bible all over. You can take it either way. Here you have a combination of both, and then you have the verb asam, to become majestic, great in importance, very much. Okay? The English has the lame. They grew very strong. And because the midwives fear God, he gave them families, and the families here is the plural of house, which is Bait, and its plural is Batim. So technically, it is the house that is important, and this brings you back to verse 1, where we hear that the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household. So again, in the Bible, it's important to realize that in both Hebrew and Greek, the same word means either or. Okay. Beit and Ikos in Greek reflect these two realities, because ultimately your house is your household. Okay, and that's the play earlier that we met, that God will build to Sarah a house that is a household, and the text on purpose uses the verb bana, which technically applies only to a building. Now people get excited. Great, Father Paul, that's a great sermon for my next Sunday. I'm going to impress. Stop bedazzling your parishioners, setting them up to masturbation. Stop doing that. Explain the original text in English. Let me repeat that. And that brings to mind a woman who started taking Hebrew. She's a mother, and then I stressed the Hebrew. She kept up, and then when it became difficult, she stopped. But once, jokingly, she made the comment to me that, Father Paul, you want me to teach my children Hebrew? I said no. And I didn't say no, sweetheart, as Americans do. Just no. I'm teaching you Hebrew if you are willing to continue, so that you can teach the children the original text in English. And she and the people around her just were stunned by my answer. And I'm repeating it today. I'm teaching you. I'm not teaching your children. I'm not teaching you so that you can teach your children Father Paul's sermons and teaching. Are you kidding me? I'm teaching you so that you can teach yourself Scripture as I'm trying to teach you Scripture. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. And you could see that this is the setup for the story of Exodus. You all know how the so-called plagues culminate with butchering of the firstborn of the Egyptians and the saving of the firstborn of the Israelites. Okay? So as usual, the first chapter is very important because it sets the tone for the entire story. And I showed you how it reaches throughout Scripture, again, especially through the names of the two midwives. And then, in chapter 2, we have the introduction of the one who will be the main character in the event of Exodus, and then throughout until Deuteronomy, and beyond that through his teaching throughout the Bible, which is Moses. So chapter 2 starts like this. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took to wife a daughter of Levi. Again, Moses is presented as a son of Levi in view of the fact that his brother Aaron would be the head of the priesthood, and the name Levi is connected with the priesthoods. You know it through Levites and so on and so forth. Now, don't start to figure out and go and dig in Egypt and Israel and Sinai to find the bones of Levi. I mean, for heaven's sakes. Silly Western scholarship, but what can we do? The woman conceived and bore a son. Notice this, that a Levi is taking another Levite, because that will be later in the law, that a priest should take a person from the tribe, if possible, to keep the whole thing together, which is the classic approach to priesthood. I mean, you have this very often, in the Orthodox tradition. Obviously, the Catholics do not get, the priests do not get married, but you marry a daughter. You could see it on the website of the Orthodox churches in North America, that a son of a priest married a daughter of a priest, or just a new priest married a daughter of a priest, and so on and so forth. So you can give this example to make the people understand what's going on. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes. Okay, very important. I talked about this matter earlier, but let's revisit it now, because it's very important. Mainly that the word teba is translated as basket, whereas the same word is translated as ark in the story of Noah, which means that teba technically is a box. But this is detrimental in the English translation, because if you have ark in the case of Noah, you're going to connect it with the Ark of the Covenant. It's impossible that you would do otherwise. Whereas in the original, the basket of Moses, which is Teba, is connected to what is translated as Ark of Noah. And that is very important, and I made my comments then that both of them had to do with the waters and so on, so you could hear the connection. And then the text is making this even clearer, because it's adding and daubed it with bitumen and pitch, which you have heard earlier in 6:14. Now, in English, only the word pitch brings to mind the other, but still you are hearing that it's a basket. And if you have a smart student in your Sunday school would ask you, why should he do that for the basket, and you will be in trouble answering. And she put the child in it and placed it among the reeds. Again, this will prepare us for the story of Exodus. So you see how the threat of the water underlines this story and brings to mind the story of the flood. Because Suf, reeds, is the word that will appear later with what is translated, unfortunately, with the Red Sea, although in the original is Yam Suf. Now, I know a smart preacher would say, because there are a lot of reeds in the Red Sea and so on, but you're adding Red Sea, and the original doesn't allow you this, and then you will have the signature at the end, at the river's brink. Okay? Now, river is like the sea in the Bible and so on. But what is interesting, at least to me, hearing the original, that what is translated as brink is the lip of the river. And it's an expression. We have it also in Arabic, because what's the lib is the edge, the rim of something. Use it also in English to refer to the rim of a glass and so on. Now, to go ahead for 15 minutes and speak on the English is not helpful for the story, but it is helpful to draw the attention of your hearers, not to say, it's impossible, no one talks like that. Yes, people talk the way their language tells them how to talk. But what's the big deal here? The big deal is that word, Safa, is the same word that is used in the post-flood story to speak of the language, and thus the languages of the peoples, with another word which is Lashon, which means tongue. And I discuss this in both my books. Am I making sense? I am convinced that I'm making sense. Not to you, figure things out and do what you want, so long as you don't appeal to the English. You have to tell me what the text is saying, and the text is not in English. With all due respect to the Baptists and the way they look at the KJV, inspired directly by God, as you see on many of their signs in North Carolina. No, 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 it doesn't work that way. So you have pitch, you have lip, and you have teba.
The Bible as Literature is a production of the Ephesus School Network.